Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder. And today we are going to be getting into the modern second wave feminist movement. Ladies in class, I tell you, you get 3 days in U.S. History all to yourself. This is day 3. Learning targets for today, we'll talk about how the movement arose in the 1960s. We'll talk about the tactics and goals of various women's groups and their leaders. And we will talk about the impact of the women's movement on society today. So we remember the earlier feminist movements that started in 1848 with the Seneca Falls Convention, ends in 1920 with the right to vote and women earned suffrage. But unfortunately, they didn't win full equality. Some women considered that a victory, but others said that's just the scrap of bread that they're sending to us. And so they continue to fight. And the civil rights movement basically inspires women to demand gender equality. If we can have racial equality, why can't we have gender equality as well? It also taught them tactics to get it. And then finally, think about the stereotypical wife in the 1950s, the ideal housewife. That's what a woman was supposed to be. It was even glamorized on television and in the media. But they're not happy with this stereotypical housewife role. And also, the women went to work, the women that did go to work, weren't treated fairly. They weren't treated equally. They were sexually harassed and weren't able to work their way up into the leadership of the company. That was a man's world. Women were resigned to clerical work and other basically typical women jobs. And so these are the conditions that lay the foundation for the women's rights movement. And this woman, Betty Friedan, puts forth the theory of feminism, and she creates a generation of feminists with this book called The Feminine Mystique. And feminism is the theory that socially, politically, and economically, men and women should be equal. And the feminine mystique, Betty Friedan makes her famous. She helps establish the National Organization of Women, and she becomes the first president of NOW. And it is dedicated to winning the true equality of the sexes. The National Organization of Women had two major priorities. Their first was to further and pass the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. Now, this was introduced in the 1920s and had gone through various versions of it, but then finally in the 1970s, it's passed by both houses of Congress, which means then it goes to the states, and each individual state ratifies it, and you need 3/4 of the states to ratify it. That would be 38 states. They only get 35. Indiana does ratify the amendment, just so you know what our state did. And they only got 35 out of the 38. And even with an extension into the 1980s of getting the amendment passed, they aren't able to do it. But even today, people are still working toward the passage of this amendment. And their other priority was reproductive rights. They want a woman to be able to be in control of her own body. If she wants to choose an abortion, she should be able to. She should have access to birth control, etc. Be in charge of reproductive rights. Gloria Steinem was also a radical feminist in the 1950s or 60s and 70s and all the way up through today. She's also a journalist and a political activist who exposed the humiliation that a Playboy bunny would have to endure. She worked at a New York club as a Playboy bunny. You can see her picture here. And she basically exposes this and goes on to found Ms. Magazine, which is an American liberal feminist magazine. And basically she is one of the most influential feminists along with Betty Friedan. Opposition. You're going to run into some opposition with an idea such as groundbreaking as gender equality. And I say that tongue firmly implanted in cheek. Most men and even some women oppose this movement. Phyllis Schlafly is a woman still alive today, and she's made news recently with her views on the wage gap and paying men and women the same. And she works tirelessly to defeat this amendment because she basically says that, it's trying to restructure human nature. Ever since the beginning, men go out and work and women nest and stay at home and take care of things there. And this is a woman saying this, and she's very conservative. She also argues that this would basically compel women to serve in the military and be a part of the draft. It would end sex-segregated bathrooms and hurt family life, basically, if they had both men and women equal in the relationship and men and women equal in socially. So what are some effects of this women's movement? Well, Title VII, basically beginning in 1964, remember, bans discrimination on the basis of sex in that Civil Rights Act of 1964. You can't discriminate based on race, gender, anything like that. And also Title IX, which just recently celebrated its 40th anniversary. Yeah, 40th anniversary. Basically bans discrimination in education. So Title IX is very famous because it basically says that in public schools you have to have the same amount of men's sports opportunities and women's sports opportunities. That's what it's famous for. It says you have to be equal in other ways as well, but men and women's sports opportunities, this also paves the way for women athletes. And you can look more information up about that if you're interested in that. Also in the 1970s, Roe versus Wade is the Supreme Court case, very controversial. But they essentially say that women have the right to an abortion during the first 3 months of her pregnancy. It's a right to privacy issue, which is under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. And before this decision, women would try dangerous and illegal ways to end their pregnancies. Dangerous because it might end their life as well. And so now women have the right to an abortion during the first 3 months of her pregnancy. We still talk about this issue today, pro-life versus pro-choice, and it's still controversial, but Roe versus Wade made abortions legal in the United States. Also, it opens up more occupations in medicine, law, and accounting than had before to women. But unfortunately, the downside of it is that women still earn less than men on average. Let me show you this graph here. Based on educational attainment, whatever education level you get to, men still earn more than women, unfortunately. And there are some terms that describe this. Pink collar is, we have white collar office jobs, blue collar factory jobs. Pink collar and the pink collar ghetto is where women are condemned to work in a job industry that is dominated by women that rarely leads to better careers. And also the glass ceiling refers to the unbreakable barrier that keeps women from rising up the rungs of the corporate ladder, and they cannot get paid as much, they cannot attain the same status, the same job as men can. And this is bad because if they're qualified, then they should be able to get the same position as a man. The majority also of the nation's poor are single women and single moms. Basically, one of the best indicators of poverty coming out of high school is, did that girl have a pregnancy? If she had a child, she more than likely will end up on some sort of government assistance program, working and ending up having a lower paying job with fewer benefits, and it can hinder the rest of her life. And so we still have some work to do on gender equality, but this was a great step in the right direction, and this is a brief overview of it. So fill out your learning targets, and I'll see you back in class. Bye-bye.